that entitled Accountants and the Future World of Work, that will be presented by Professor Christine Jubb and moderated by Miss Linda Kusumaningudari. Before we start this webinar, let me introduce myself. My name is Jonathan Theodore Kusuma, and today I will be the master of the ceremony for this seminar session. There are several rules that participants are required to follow. First, participant must write a summary of the seminar and submit it at the latest at 5 p.m. Second, participant is eligible to receive SAT points and certificate if participants had enrolled for this webinar and submitted the summary. In the end of the session, there is a evaluation form that all participants must fill. So make sure that you complete it at the end of the session. As an additional information, if you haven't enrolled yourself, you may fill the registration form, which will be closed at 1:30 p.m. And the registration form is now available in the chat box. Now we will listen our opening words from Mr. Gatot Supriyanto. As a Dean of Faculty of Economics and Communication of BINUS University, unfortunately, Mr. Gatot couldn't be here today with us because of another thing. But without reducing any respect to Professor Christine Jubb and every participant that come to the seminar, he has created an opening word video that will be played now.
Professor Christine Jubb from Swinburne University of Technology, Melbourne. Dr. Linda Wati as the head of Accounting Department, BINUS University. Dr. Toto Rusmanto as the head of Program Accounting Technology, McKinsey Campus, BINUS University. Fellow lecturer, students, and honorable guests. Good afternoon, and thank you for attending this international webinar. I'm really honored to welcoming all of you on behalf of Faculty of Economics and Communication, Bina Nusantara University, in our international webinar entitled Accountants and the Future World of Work. BINUS, as the top private university in Indonesia, included in the QS World University Ranking 2021, as well as the top 250 universities in the QS Asia University Ranking, have continuous commitment to provide a world-class learning activities and learning experience. This webinar is an excellent example of such continuous commitment. A highly reputable professor from Swinburne University of Technology, Melbourne, Australia, is invited to enlighten us with new perspectives of digitalization and technology. This topic is very important. As most of you probably aware, the technology as well as the pandemic situation have changed lots of business and organization around the world, including accounting and finance profession. As such, BINUS, including the accounting department, have been preparing ourselves and students to widen our perspective on the additional technology-based skills that need to be mastered by our students in entering the challenging Industry 4.0 era. We need also to be more focusing on how we can adapt and embrace the opportunities and remain relevant to world of work. I do believe that Professor Jubb will provide us with lots of new insights during the webinar. Enjoy the webinar, and I wish you to have a fantastic day. Thank you.
We really want to say thank you to Mr. Gatot for the opening word. After listening to the opening word, let me introduce our moderator for this session, Miss Linda Kusumaningudari. Miss Linda Kusumaningudari got her Bachelor of Economic and Accounting Science in 11 Maret University of Indonesia, then completed her Master of Science in Accounting in Gajah Mada University of Indonesia, and then she was awarded a Swinburne University Postgraduate Research Award by Swinburne University of Technology for 4 years during her journey on completing her Doctor of Philosophy by thesis in Swinburne University of Technology, Australia. Ms. Linda Kusumaningudari is currently a senior lecturer in Faculty of Economic and Communication, Department of Accounting in Binus University. Now please proceed, Ms. Linda Kusumaningudari.
Thank you, Joe. Industry 4.0 is revolutioning the way companies manufacture, improve, and distribute their products. Manufacturers are integrating new technologies, including Internet of Things, cloud computing and analytics, and AI and machine learning into their production facilities and operations. In the last few years, we have witnessed an explosion of new technology. This new technology have affected many professions, including accountant, auditor, and financial analysts on how they do their job. It's consequently critical that accountants, auditors, financial analysts look at these technological trends, understand the resulting changes, and figure out what role they can play in the new economy which will be created. Good afternoon, my honorable colleagues and lecturers, my beloved students and attendees. I'm Linda Kusumaningudari. I'm the moderator of today's international webinar. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, I welcome you all. I really wish that everyone who is joining this webinar is in good health. Let's begin our webinar. We have a very interesting topic in our today's webinar to enrich our understanding on the future world of work for accountants, auditors, and financial analysts. Today, we have a distinguished and honorable speaker from Swinburne University of Technology, Australia. It is an honor and immense pleasure in introducing our speaker. Professor Christine Jubb graduated from Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology with Bachelor Business in Accounting. She holds an MBA from Deakin University, and she was awarded a PhD from University of Melbourne. And she is currently a researcher and professor at Swinburne University of Technology, Melbourne, Australia. She has conducted many research in some research area of interest, including auditing, sustainability reporting audit, corporate governance, and IFRS. She has been awarded many research grants by Australian Research Council, IRC, CPA Australia, Institution of Diploma Engineers Bangladesh, ISA Philippine Foundation, and our partner organizations since 2004. Professor Christine Jubb is a member of several professional organizations, includes Accounting and Finance Association of Australia and New Zealand, AFANS, American Accounting Association, AAA, CPA Australia, and the Institute of Chartered Accountant, Australia and New Zealand, CAANZ. She was appointed chair the Exam Policy Advisory Committee of CPA Australia for 15 years. And she was appointed chair of EPAC and many other professional organizations. In regard to the scientific paper publications, I can see here in her CV that she has published so many research monographs, chapter in research monograph, referred article in various high-ranked Scopus journal regularly. Apology that I won't be able to mention all the articles publication because the list is so long. It's very amazing. Good afternoon, Prof. Christine. I trust you're well. Thank you for your time. So we can see here that we have hundreds of participants. So it may reflect our enthusiasm of this webinar. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, the rules are simple. Please turn off your mic and keep it in mute during the presentation. Participants are welcome to give comments and questions in the chat rooms. And don't forget to mention your name before mentioning your question and comments. Later in the Q&A session, I will choose and read some comments and questions after the speaker's presentation is done. So bear with me a little while, okay? Prof. Christine, you may start your presentation. The mic is yours.
Thank you very much, Linda, and thank you for the warm welcome to everybody. What Linda didn't mention is that I was her supervisor. So it's really wonderful to see her doing well and running this seminar. The tables have turned, Linda. You're now in charge of me. So I'm really pleased to be here. I'm honoured to be asked. Linda, if you could share the slides, is that what you're going to do? Or should I?
I didn't get the slide, Prof. So maybe you can do it from your screen, please. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So can you see that?
Yes, Prof. Yeah, I can see that.
Okay. So Linda asked me to speak to this topic, and I'm only too happy to do that. It's, as she said, such an important topic. And the world is just changing so much. And all of you are going to be graduating, if you haven't already, at a time of immense change and immense challenge in a way. So it's partly because of Industry 4, but it's just digitalization period and the advances, significant technological advances going on, disrupting everything really, and potentially threatening employment unless accountants adapt and are agile and go beyond technical accounting skills. They'll be left behind, I'm afraid. Others will step into the breach, other professions, particularly information systems and increasingly environmental scientists, environmental engineers. So there's a lot of competition for accountants' work. A lot of people would like accountants' work. Most accountants, especially auditors, have a monopoly on work because in most countries, the government mandates the financial reporting must be audited. And that really gives a natural monopoly in financial reporting in most countries. But increasingly, what we're seeing is non-financial reporting being a highly contested space. So accountants don't have the free rein they once had with a job for life. In my era, that's the way it's been. But in your era, especially after COVID, I'm afraid, you're going to need to adapt. So I don't need, I'm sure, to tell you digital natives, you young people, how important technology is. The trends of this technological change and also social shifting, particularly towards more importance of environmental, social and governance culture in a company and trying to measure that and report on that, all of that's happening simultaneously. And so we're getting much bigger shifts in the work available, the type of work, the length of contracts. That's certainly happening in Australia. I don't know about in your country. But accountants used to have a job for life, and that's no longer true, perhaps other than in academia. And even that is under threat because COVID has really threatened the Australian education sector as well. And there's more of this to come. There's a lot of innovation that we don't even know yet what it will be, and it will cause greater shifts in employment, in work patterns, in expectations of employees. And COVID has just heightened that even more. It's made it particularly difficult for those who've got to be close to their work, have to go to work, can't work from home. Accountants are generally fortunate in that many of them can work from home. And probably that trend will continue. You might tell me later when we move to questions whether that's happening in Indonesia as well. It's certainly happening in Australia, and accountants are amongst the lucky ones who've mostly retained their jobs as long as their business, their employer, has been able to either stay open or receive government help. Our government has given a lot of help. So we've got all that going on as well. The after effects of COVID, or we can't really call it after effects yet. We're still going through COVID. So what's going to happen is that low-wage job categories are going to really reduce, and the share of employment in those categories is really going to decline. And for accountants, that really means the basic bookkeeping, the data entry, the data processing, that is very much under threat. And there are some industries like health where it's not possible to stay home and do that sort of work because of privacy considerations. That's something else that COVID has impacted. So when you graduate, if you haven't already, you'll really be feeling the job market pressure, I suspect. Certainly in Australia, our graduates are starting to feel that. And the more they can work whilst they study, getting that experience, that business acumen whilst they study, that really helps. So I don't know how prevalent that is in Indonesia. It's the way I did all my studies. I've only ever studied part-time. So I came to academia quite late after years in industry, and that was the best lesson I could have had. So part-time work, no matter what it is, if you're in some sort of setting where there's an accounting theme, you're learning all the time about accounting, about internal control, about the potential for fraud, about so many things that you don't realize you're learning at the time. You're seeing theories put into practice, and it helps you see and understand and explain trends and what's going on. So all of that learning really mixed with industry experience is, I think, the best way to really get a foot in the door for a good job, a job that's not insecure, a job that will last if you want it to last, but also give you the qualifications to move upwards if that's what you want as well. What COVID's done is really accelerate all the trends that were already in place and just accentuated everything. It's also made a lot of young people really, in work, I mean, in full-time work, really quite unsatisfied with their work-life balance. And I really see that trend in young people, including my own children, really fighting to keep some work-life balance, especially if they're trying to homeschool children as well, if school's not in. So there's a lot of pressures in the system, and the more you can do to help yourselves, the better, by just lifelong learning. So what I've got here is a report by McKinsey's. It's dated now, it's 2017. So much has happened since 2017. But I thought it was interesting because it really does list Indonesia amongst other countries in Asia. And what this report did was to look at the percentage of work activities that potentially could be automated. And of course, in 17, they're looking very much forward to the future, whereas now we've got a little more insight into exactly what's happening. So with the then current technologies in 2017, Indonesia was amongst the highest. It's fourth from the top rate of work activities, potentially that could be automated. And this study looked at 46 countries. I've only pulled out most of Asia and a few of the major other economies, but this report really makes it clear nowhere in the world will be immune, and no country will be immune. So I particularly then went looking for digitalization opportunities in Indonesia. And McKinsey had released another report in 2019. I haven't got it referenced here, I hope I've got it later, that particularly just looked at Indonesia and the potential for particularly your young population coming through, very young country, and how it can actually increase your productivity and your GDP growth and give Indonesia marketing opportunities, access to markets, etc., which will create jobs. So the whole outlook for Indonesia by this McKinsey study was really very positive. Yes, there will be job losses, but overall there'll be job creation. And this report made it very clear that already you've got a very high-tech sector, very tech-savvy youth, and you've got many innovators and entrepreneurs already harnessing digitalization. And you're very open to these technologies, on average, in general, as a country, perhaps because of your youthfulness. But it's really exciting to see what is forecast for your country, and it's really going to grow. And if you can harness and increase the productivity, and there's no doubt that's happening all around the world, because those of us who can work from home, we've really increased our productivity. We know that's happening. But we've got to be mindful that this routine, predictable work, the bookkeeping end of accounting, that's being revolutionised too by cloud accounting and other technologies that mean bookkeepers can work from anywhere, whereas they used to need to be close to clients. Just fairly basic tax work, payroll work. These routine, predictable tasks are going to be very susceptible to being automated. And they had a statistic in this publication that around 10% of Indonesia's economy in 2019 related to this quite routine data processing and data collecting. So it's very clear that new skills are going to be needed everywhere in the world, not just in Indonesia. But if you can do that well, if your higher education sector can harness and really take advantage of sharing that knowledge and inculcating those skills in the student population, it will really make a big difference to the way your country grows. So even though we're going to lose some routine tasked jobs, there's going to be a need for much higher level skills. So the more you can develop them whilst you're studying, the better. The more you can develop these higher social skills, more emotional intelligence, higher cognitive skills, problem solving, that sort of skill, and especially in teams, the better off you'll be. And these higher level skills, they take quite a lot of work to develop, and maturity, emotional maturity, that you have to work at. It doesn't always come naturally. And you've got to be willing to adopt, especially artificial intelligence and automation, to stay in the game, to keep the boundaries around accounting, which, as I said at the start, many other professions would really like to encroach on and are encroaching on. And so universities have got a really big responsibility too, to help students learn and to engender a culture of lifelong learning. The job for life is gone. If it was ever there in Indonesia, I don't know. It certainly was in Australia, and accountants were prime recipients of that, but not anymore. So we're going to need, not me, I'm old, but you are going to need to be able to adapt, change your careers, perhaps go and do a bit more training, or train more while you're working, seek some micro credentials if they're available, but just constantly learning, improving, skilling up, building your capacity. And it's a personal responsibility. Nobody else is going to do it for you. You have to be proactive about it. And as I go through, you'll see there's many quite low-cost ways to do that. So let's delve a little more deeply into artificial intelligence. No doubt you know about it, probably better than me if you're so digital savvy, but it's just exploded in the last 4 years, almost exponential growth. And then a number of things have overlapped to cause that. Firstly, data and storage costs have really dropped. Computing power's grown exponentially. While I was reading this, I was reading for this, I read that our phones, our mobile phones, have more computing power than was available when the US put a man on the moon. That's an incredible fact. So I've got no reason to doubt it. It was an incredible source. So at the same time, machine learning algorithms that drive this AI have become so much more sophisticated, and they've absolutely harnessed these huge computing power increases and the exponential growth in data to help them learn. And I mean, you've got to be careful with machine learning as well. Any biases in the archival history, like recruitment, not seeking a diverse enough employment, not enough women, you've got to be very careful with those sorts of things, because the learning will only be as good as the historical records on which the learning's based. It was also stated in this source that 70% of graduates' first roles, your first jobs, they'll look very different 10 to 15 years hence. And probably that 10 to 15 is on the lower side, not the higher side, given the exponential growth in all of these technologies. So the more you can do to help yourself stay ahead of the curve, be noticed, the better. So we're really moving away from manual processing, which accountants have always done. More recently, in Australia at least, that's been shipped over to India or another place for workers to do overnight. But even that is stopping, and it's just going to be machine-led. So what's needed is these more creative skills, these more emotionally mature skills to manage people, to know when to apply the expertise and when to call in expertise and what sort of expertise to call in, and to communicate with others. And we, as employees, are going to need to rethink where we work. Well, I think we're well on the way to that. It's been an absolute revolution in terms of working from home, how they work, and what talents and capabilities they bring to their work. So what that really means is that millions of people are going to need to change occupations around the world. This is going to be a constant theme in the next few years. And it's not that that's new, it's been happening for many years, but it's increased. The speed with which it's happening has increased. And at the same time, many economies have slowed, and the economies are not doing so well in many cases. So if it doesn't work well, it does have the potential to cause a lot of economic harm. So workers are going to need different skills. Workplaces and workflows are going to change. People are going to be working much more alongside machines. We're doing that now with computers, but machines that think, machines that can act like humans, that's reasonably new. So these jobs that are dominated by highly automatable activities, and accounting is one of the most affected by the potential for automation. It's really going to change things. And the high wage jobs will increase because people are going to be needed to manage these machines, to manage the tasks and the people. And that will require management skills, emotional intelligence, all on top of your normal technical skills that you're learning while you're at university. And no doubt there's jobs where you don't even know what they'll be that will be forthcoming. So the skills very much in demand are skills your lecturers would really like to see as well. Good social and emotional skills. All of this will help you in your studies as well. Advanced technological skills, especially if you can learn some programming. And I'm really going to try and encourage you to do that today. Not really practicing what I preach, but I can just see that this is the way things are going to go. And you're going to need some programming skills to really sustain jobs into the future. And these higher cognitive skills, especially critical thinking. So this is where a unit like, or a subject like accounting theory comes in. I teach accounting theory at my university, and I know Linda does too, at your university. And I know a lot of students hate it, but it's really proving its worth because it's designed to teach you critical thinking, to be skeptical, to question everything, to try and match theory and practice, to think beyond the immediate short term to what might happen next, and so on and so on. So critical thinking is going to be really important. Logical reasoning. And of course, that's the basic skill of programming as well. But also being creative, thinking outside the square, coming up with novel solutions, being innovative, being entrepreneurial. All of those skills will be valued as well. And especially working in a team, we know very much that teams overcome the limitations of individual cognitive processing. We've all got those limitations. Somebody will be much better at something than you are in your team. And choosing teams wisely is another part of this whole aspect. And we need to be able to problem solve using complex information processing in our brains. So the more we can do to help our brains, the better, because that cognitive skill, not giving in to the limitations we all have in how much we can process at once, how much we can remember. But you've got all of those faculties at your fingertips when you're young, and that's the time to really take advantage of them, become expert in your whatever excites you. It's best to follow your passion if you can when you develop these sorts of skills. So here I've tried to break the skills down. We hear into individual tasks rather than quite broad categories. But constantly in Australia, we're hearing about STEM. And I'm really interested to see that in America, the American Accounting Association is really pushing, making the case for accounting and finance to be classed as STEM units. They're not in accounting in Australia. I don't know if they are in Indonesia, you can tell me later. But America is certainly heading that way. And there's certainly a case to be made for that. And the case is becoming stronger and stronger because we're being pressed to use statistics much more, to use technology design or design science, to use data analytics, data visualization, data science, programming skills, software engineering, to really understand systems and system processes and to be able to analyze those systems, thinking about the internal controls, the flows of information, what happens at what point, who has responsibility, how does the audit proceed. That sort of knowledge, by combining accounting and information systems, I don't know if you've got a unit or subject that does that, but that sort of training is going to be invaluable. And of course, this critical thinking and all sorts of digital literacies, just mastering everything you can. So one of the things Swinburne is doing at the moment is having all undergraduates eligible to join the Adobe suite, the Adobe literacy skills, the digital literacies. Every program in this suite is made available to students. So they're designing flyers, reports, publications, and publishing them. And some are very skilled at it. Under communication, we've really got to practice active listening. So that's what that little picture down the bottom is meant to convey. They're not really actively listening, but yelling at each other. Speaking in a way that's understandable, that uses clear, succinct language, no matter what language it is. Writing skills, it's really the 3 R's. So the stronger you are in the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic, really you're going to be well placed for this world of the future. And these are basic skills that you get at secondary school, primary school, and secondary school that you really should be refining in your higher education and once you go to work. So there's nothing really new about this. People who listened well, spoke well, wrote well, have usually been able to get higher level positions, work. But it's becoming more and more important. The need to coordinate teams, the adoption of a service orientation to deal with customers and clients, the need to train and instruct and negotiate, coach people to visualize what would work best where, and to brainstorm that sort of idea. And I'm afraid the technical skills, they're just going to be presumed as a base. So everything you're learning at the moment in your accounting and auditing units, the standards, your Indonesian standards. I've got several Indonesian PhD candidates, one of whom is doing the accounting standards, the adoption of IFRS in Indonesia through your accounting body. So I know you're using the same standards pretty much as many countries in the world, 140 odd of them. So those standards are just taken for granted. That knowledge doesn't mean you have to memorize everything because you know the resource, you can go and look it up, but you've got to be able to read it and interpret it and apply it. That skill, even if you do really well in your studies and get HDs, is just taken for granted now, I'm afraid. It's these other higher cognitive skills that are really going to be important. And of course, there's always some law that you need to know about and some quasi-regulatory rules like your stock exchange. And then there's more guidance than regulation in corporate governance codes and the Global Reporting Initiative framework. Excuse me. And the Integrated Reporting Framework. And the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board standards, the US standards. I'm just going to turn off a minute while I cough. Can't see how to turn off. Just getting a cough lot, so I stop coughing.
It's okay, Prof.
Okay, so for universities, I've said some of this already. It's going to be really important to engender those digital skills, to develop a culture of lifelong learning in students, to really deliver digital teaching well. It's quite hard to do. And we have to switch overnight to digital teaching in Australia, and I think you did too. And it's quite a different skill. And the importance of getting students to work in teams, to solve problems together, challenging wicked problems, and to think about the ethics of problems as well. And the costs of doing that, the costs of universities buying the necessary technology that the accounting firms are using. Some firms, some software companies are only too glad to give it away and have students get used to their brand. But it's quite an investment for universities at a time when COVID's destroyed economies. So it's going to be challenging. And you need to look for wherever you can for free resources. And there are plenty of free resources. So what's really creating this movement is robotic process automation, or RPA. And it's just transforming accounting work, and it's changing the kind of work accountants do. And it's had an irrefutable impact on accounting and auditing especially. And the Big Four, we know, I don't know if it's happening in Indonesia, but it's certainly happening in Australia, where the Big Four are changing their hiring practices, and they're looking outside of conventional accounting degrees. They're looking for programmers and software engineers and environmental scientists and econometricians. The skill sets they're looking for have really broadened. And because different training in different industries makes you to think very differently. If you've ever been in a room with engineers presented with an accounting problem, I don't know if you teach accounting to engineers at Swinburne, they do, accounting for non-accountants, very different approach to problem solving compared to accountants. We are so institutionalized. We're all raised on the same standards, similar sort of companies, legislation, and so on. That's institutional theory at work. We are institutionalized into a particular way of behaving. As accountants, we need to behave to belong to a professional accounting body and so on. Engineers, they're very different. They've got their own ethics, of course. I'm not suggesting otherwise, but they just think differently. So the Big Four are really benefiting from these diverse hiring practices, and they're paying much more attention to females as well, which is really good news. For a female, that's really great. And all of this means that you need to compete by upskilling in areas that were once not necessary. So I'm relying very much here on a paper that's in a journal called Accounting Horizons. It's an American Accounting Association journal, very recent, just in the last published issue of that journal. And nearly all of this presentation is coming from academic journals. They're just a wonderful source of cutting edge work. What is going on? It's no good looking at books. They take too long to publish, even now, even today. But these journals, these especially high quality academic journals, is where you will find what you're looking for if you want to know more about this topic. So this article by Kakina et al. Talks about what we know from the past. What do we already know about RPA? We already know the knowledge and skills and abilities needed for jobs in analytics and managing knowledge, the intellectual property. And we know that technical skills, as well as the soft skills like creativity, emotional intelligence, problem solving, critical thinking, they are known as soft skills. We've got publications, journal articles that document that that's needed for data analytics work. And what we're increasingly finding is that employers are seeking applicants who can demonstrate not just a depth of knowledge in their areas, and we hope accounting's in STEM. This was an American article, so it was taken from that point of view. But they've also got to showcase a breadth of knowledge outside of these traditional strengths, such as business acumen. Now, what is that and how do you get it? It's very hard to explain how you get that. You get it by working in an accounting environment, but not everybody can do that. You might be working, but not in a particularly strong accounting environment. So I always think the best way to develop acumen is to really keep up with the business media, no matter how you get your media, whether it's newspapers, social media, TV news, the business news I'm talking about, films that come out now and again, like Wall Street, and there's various films with accountants in them. The more you can absorb the way business works, see it in action, the more you will develop business acumen. And when you've got business acumen, it makes it so much easier to cope with an interview, to show that you are aware of what's going on. Now, you don't really have to program to be using RPA. There are software vendors off the shelf, and they argue very much that their software is business-led, easy to control. You don't need to be able to code. You can drag and drop. It's very easily designed, and it's work-ready. So this need for programmers that I'm talking about, there is a view that eventually AI will do the programming. We will not need programmers either, but we're not there yet. And even when we are there, I really think having some coding knowledge will be really helpful to be able to manage what's going on. So this study by Kokina, that's the full list of authors there, really interviews people in practice using AI to try to find out what accountants' roles are in this RPA process. And they divide accountants into identifiers, explainers, trainers, sustainers, and quite a bit separately, the analysers. Now, I just want to talk about trainers first there. It's not the trainer you think. Linda's a trainer. I'm a trainer. But this is training the machine learning, training the machine. So it's not using that term in the way we conventionally do. So keep that in mind. But except for the trainer, which is much more information technology oriented, programming oriented, all those other roles can and usually are fulfilled by accountants. But the skill set's got to change to be able to really do that well. So here we've got some definitions. The identifier looks for digital opportunities, assesses them, and develops a business case for working on them, making them come to fruition. An analyzer performs predictive and prescriptive analysis, as well as the traditional historical analysis, trying to estimate how many transactions there might be in 5 years, for instance. An explainer helps the programmer design the way things are now, the way things are processed now, but also helps the programmer to see how things might be into the future. And also is the go-between between management and the internal auditor and external auditor. Once the system's implemented, management has to understand what it's doing. Directors are responsible for signing off on the financial reports. They need to have confidence and understand the system. And then after the accountant's done the explaining, the accountant can move to the sustainer role. I'm going to jump to that because I explained trainer before. So the sustainer helps ensure that the automation continues doing what it should do. So in this sense, accountants are becoming something called process architects. I had never heard that phrase in the context of an accountant until I read this article. But it's coming from industry, so very much a practitioner-oriented study interviewing a large number of accounting firms using these systems. So it was across a number of firms, quite a large number of firms, for this sort of research work to be done. So what the accountants are so good at, because of their understanding of the flows of work, the internal controls and the checks and balances as the work flows, and fraud detection, what they're so good at is documenting this process, what should happen, and looking for the exceptions. There will inevitably be exceptions, but there shouldn't be too many exceptions to be able to automate with AI. And then trying to estimate how many hours of labour, of manual work, might be saved. So accountants have this deep understanding that really puts them in good stead to be helping in this process. And companies that ignore this will eventually be left behind. They just won't be competitive. They'll lose competitive advantages they might have because they just won't be as productive. It's very hard to compete with companies that are doing this well. So accountants then go on to explain to the software designers and the bot developers, my granddaughter, who's in grade 3 at primary school, is learning to program robots. I don't know if that's pushing down that low in Indonesia, but you can just say that this is going to be second nature when people like my granddaughter study and then get a job. So in Australia, our primary schools are recognising this change, and they're really trying to equip students as they go through COVID. I don't know what COVID's done to robotics training. Probably hasn't helped one bit, but at least there's an awareness. So you can tell me later whether your Indonesian primary schools are doing anything similar. And you can be sure it's going on in other countries of the world well before Australia probably started doing it. And so accountants are very good at creating flowcharts. They've got symbols for this and symbols for that are standardized and everybody understands. I mean, that's really what the compliance task in internal audit is all about, and so many other accounting tasks. And I really see this as exciting because accounting can be very boring with those tedious tasks as well. If they can be farmed out to a machine, that's really great. Leaves you to be doing higher level work, really thinking to how to help management, if management is your client, how to help detect fraud, stop fraud, and so on and so on. So accountants have all these skills on this list to identify the source of documents and where the documents are flowing to, which system, to describe exactly what a human would do if a human was doing this task, to define the data elements needed to be extracted, look for exceptions, document everything so that there's a record of what's done and the process, and develop these lines of communication. So I'm hoping you're seeing how important these roles are. They're crucial to AI development, AI working properly as it should. And this article does a really good job of talking about the skills for each of these separate roles that will be needed. It's very small on my screen, so I'm hoping you can see it. But it talks about things like being RPA literate, having technical acumen or business acumen, or being a creative thinker, or understanding programming, the algorithms, and how to mine data, or actually being able to write code in Python or R or some other source code. These codes do not have to be proprietary. There's a lot of open source coding that you can teach yourself with the help of tools like YouTube and LinkedIn Learning and books that I'm sure are in your library. And the more of this you can be becoming familiar with, whilst you're still learning and perhaps working part-time, the better. So it's quite challenging. I'm sure you feel you've got enough to do to study and do well with your units, your subjects. But if you can find time to at least become familiar with the language, to learn a few lines of code in one language or another. Our finance people at Swinburne are being forced to learn Python. They're having to teach Python. That hasn't happened to the accountants yet, but it's already happened to our finance staff. So the more you can upgrade your skills, lift your capabilities, the more an employer will value you. So I won't labour that, because you could go and look at that article for yourself. I've got a list of references at the end. Another area that I think is really interesting in using AI is something that's really only just emerging, RegTech. And of course, I'm sure you know about FinTech, but now we're getting RegTech, where the prudential regulator, particularly the central bank, the your OJK, that sort of regulator is starting to apply RegTech. So looking for ways to automate new technologies to solve especially compliance issues. Things like money laundering. I mean, this is a huge thing for banks. And complying with Basel and not falling foul of money laundering schemes or scrutiny. It's a huge issue. Our banks, our big banks, we've had a lot of failure, not failures financially, but failures in systems with banks, to the extent that one in particular was allowing money laundering unwittingly. The code was wrong and it allowed through thousands of transactions. And it's now been pretty much shown that amongst those transactions was paying for payments towards terrorism, payments for child pornography, gambling, laundering gambling money, basically. And that bank has been fined a huge amount by our regulator. So I'm sure your regulator is onto this as well and looking for ways to adopt RegTech. And that's another whole stream of employment. Working for a regulator can be a very satisfying thing to do. You rarely have to compromise your ethics if you work for a regulator, whereas often companies can pressure you as an accountant to compromise your ethics. So here are just some of the themes that can be found in RegTech. Risk management's just becoming a huge thing, especially with climate change risk. Managing compliance, managing reporting, statutory reporting, making sure you don't fall foul of financial regulation, monitoring the transactions, especially for money laundering, making sure people who are they say they are, and detecting fraud. And all of this is facilitated by distributed ledger technologies through blockchain. I haven't really gone into blockchain much, but it's there in the background the whole time, both in companies, accounting firms doing audits of companies, this distributed ledger technology. Our Australian Securities Exchange is adopting blockchain. I wonder if your IDE, is it? Yeah, I think it's IDE, is adopting or has adopted. So, and of course, you've got to really worry about cybersecurity and somebody mining your data illegally, holding you to ransom, as well as everything else. So this whole area is just becoming such an important source of employment growth. And
sorry, Prof. Christine, jumping into your presentation. Your session will be, the presentation session will be up in 5 minutes. It's just a gentle reminder. Thank you.
Thanks, Linda. Okay, so I'll speed up a bit. RegTech is being applied in all sorts of industries, particularly medicine for compliance and monitoring health systems, etc. So there's huge innovation going on in the RegTech area. And auditing is really making good use of digitalization as well. So this diagram's from another journal article that's so recent, it's not yet published. It's an early view article in the Journal of Emerging Technologies in Accounting, which is a really good journal to go to. It's a AAA journal if you want to follow up on any of these themes. Really, the only thing we haven't covered there is the artificial neural networks, ANN, and NLP, natural language processing. So RegTech in particular uses natural language processing, mining text, which you can do with the R program or Python, especially looking at contracts and things like that. And that same study gives a really useful list of the sorts of things that artificial intelligence is being applied to in auditing. So I'm going to skip through that a bit, make sure I finish. And then this study, same study, takes each of the big four and documents the systems they've got in use. So you could also go and research each of them, see what they do, see if you can use a trial version so that you get to come to grips with the software. And here's the other two of the big four. So the big four are into this in a very big way. So I've hinted at this along the way, but I really wanted to get to this to finish up, that a lot of these skills you can acquire yourself for free because it's open source software, something called XBRL. I don't know if Indonesia's using XBRL, but it's based on HTML and it's open source. In the US, all companies must lodge financial reports using XBRL. I've mentioned Python. Even knowing Excel really exceptionally well is a great skill. Being able to program in Excel, using all of its add-ons and doing it really well so that it's automatic. Employers still really value Excel skills. Databases, SQL, and especially use of R, which is free open source software. And also being able, even in your undergraduate degree, to use Power BI if you've got access to it. It is free to download if you've got IBM products, but sometimes you need admin permission to get it working. Tableau, though, there's a add-in to Excel by Tableau that really helps with data visualization. But Excel's no slouch at visualization as well. And of course, databases like Access as well. So really trying to shore up your prowess in these sorts of things will really help. And there's lots of free sources of training. I'm sure you can find some. You're so good at Googling that you'll find these sources. And I'm sure your library will have some of these journals that specialize in this sort of digitalization knowledge. I've just listed a few there. And as a bit of a byproduct, I added this because a lot of these skills that are going to be needed actually also assist with becoming entrepreneurs. And there's going to be more and more pressure to do that as economies suffer from COVID. People are going to be needing to be self-employed more and more. And finally, there's a list of my references. So I think I'd finished on time in the end, Linda. Lucky you told me. I'd completely lost track of time, which is not what a lecturer should do. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Prof, for your beautiful and insightful presentation of the future world of work for accountants, auditors, and financial analysts. So we can say bye-bye to conventional accounting process and welcome to the digitalization and technology-based skill that surely will be needed and important to accountant and finance job. So it's always nice to actually hear something insightful, and your ideas certainly spark a lively question among all the participants. So in the chat room, I can see 2 questions, and I believe one participants want to raise the question directly to you.
Sure.
Jason,
Okay.
are you there?
Yes, I'm
Okay.
here. Okay, so first of all, it's an honor to be able to directly speak to you, Professor Christine, and thank you, Miss Linda, to allow me to speak in the Zoom. Okay, so first, okay, so from what I see is that accounting that I know is an art, and that art is of we're seeing information, right? So accounting like is helping like sort information and display it to us. So that's the art. Some as different peoples wants different information and different ways of getting the numbers. And as I could see that technology want to help us to show those informations more, like the software that we like, as we know, like that you say that the Excel access is like wanting to show another a lot of data from it, like from the data that we input, they'll give us more and more data. And from that, from what I see as the development of technology keep on going, will we lose the art of accounting again? That's the question from me, Professor Christine. Thank you very much.
So I just missed the last bit of the question. Can you just repeat that for me?
Oh yeah. And my question is that are we going to lose the art of accounting by the cost of the development of technology?
The art of accounting. Yes,
Yeah.
that's a good way to put it. Well, hopefully not. I mean, we shouldn't, because you've always got to understand what's going on. And the best training to understand what any software is doing, whether it's bookkeeping software or whatever, is to be able to do it manually yourself first, and then, yes, let the machine go to work. But if you just let the machine do everything? How do you know what it's doing is right? So I really hope that doesn't happen. But I also have to be honest, and I think to some extent it already is happening with products like QuickBooks and MyOb and Xero. I'm not sure if you have all those brands in Indonesia, but it's already so automated. What used to be done only manually, that to some extent it's happening already, and you do lose those skills if you don't use them a lot. When you think about children doing basic arithmetic, once they get calculators, it's really hard to get them to do the arithmetic manually. I don't know if you've found that, but I'm seeing that even with my grandchildren. So there's probably going to be some loss. But on the other hand, there'll be higher level skills as well. Any more questions?
Okay. Jason, is that enough to answer your question?
I think that's enough. So from what I see, that we need to keep on practicing, right? Same as you share the story of your grandchildren, that if they start using calculator, then they will just like stick to the calculator.
Yes, you know yourself that if you don't have to do something very often, like as academics, you get a new system, you put in results once a semester. There's a good chance you can't remember it the next semester, especially when you're starting to age like me. You won't always have good memories. So, yeah, things we're not familiar with, things we don't do routinely, we do need reminding. We need to go through the process again. So it is a bit of a trap, I think.
I think that explains about my answer. Thank you very much, Professor Christian, and thank you, Miss Linda.
You're welcome, Jason. So can we go to the next question, Prof? It's from Archie Natal. So I just read it. Hello, Prof. Christian. Thank you in advance for the interesting topic that you bring to us today. I'm Archie Natal. I would like to ask a question based on your opinion. Will advanced technology lead the business strategy to meet the needs of the professional companies, such as transforming the accounting professions with an orientation to the use of technology? Or will the company lead the use of technology by developing business strategy that have been adapted according to developments? Okay.
So you're really asking, will clients lead the way, or will accountants lead the way, I think.
Yeah.
And I think there's no doubt this is what companies are doing. They are automating wherever they can because it reduces costs, it increases productivity. I mean, it started with more physical manual tasks. Think about the robotics in car factories, etc. But now it's progressing to almost any task that's routine. So, and it's in all fields. So businesses are automating first, and accountants are being forced, and auditors are being forced to follow. And in the process, they're thinking, well, this could work for us too. We could get productivity gains and growth and lower costs. So it's a constant battle to be profitable. And under capitalist systems, that is the aim. So, yeah, I think companies are leading the charge. And some accountants are being quite reluctant to hop on board. I mean, you see some accountants who really can't let go of Excel. It's all they want to use. But business has moved past beyond Excel to a large extent. It's using other tools, and Power BI particularly. So we have to keep up. Our job for life that once was when I graduated is no longer.
Okay, Prof. So I think that's all the questions, but I do have a question. So based on my meetings with some students or maybe the student candidates in business university. So most of them questioning about whether accounting job will be diminished in the next 5-10 years.
Yes, I think there's no doubt that basic accounting jobs will diminish. And that's what's so important, to look at that, look at learning as though it's a lifelong aim. The idea of getting a degree and stopping at that and being content for life and secure in your life, especially as you're starting to have families and need to buy a home and so on, it's no longer as secure as it was. But accounting is so broad. I mean, when you think about it covering finance, carbon accounting, environmental, social and governance, I mean, I hardly touched on that. I could have gone for an hour on that. I'm sure you're glad I didn't. But there is so much variety in what it is accountants are doing. And the skills of an accountant fit so well in any industry. You know, this is why so many company directors are accountants. And I know you've got a board of commissioners as well as a board of directors under your two-tier system. So I haven't really looked at the commissioners, but I know many of your academics on your boards of either commissioners or directors are accounting academics. Australia doesn't have that history of choosing academics to be directors as much as you do. And I know that's probably, you're thinking, golly, I'm never going to be a director. What's she talking about? But you never know. If you just keep learning, honing your skills, and hopefully enjoying it. I mean, you've got to be passionate about what you do in life and not see it just as a chore. So find what you're interested in and see what you can develop post your degrees, during your degrees. Just having the basic technical knowledge is no longer enough.
Okay, I agree, Prof. Yeah, long life learning, yeah, Prof. Okay, Prof. So I believe that's all the questions. So maybe we can end the question and answer. So I hope today's webinar will be enriching our understanding of the topic. We look forward that each of us will be joining, learning, and mastering technology-based skill for preparing ourselves in the work competition. On behalf of Accounting Study Program, Bina Nusantara University, I'd like to extend my gratitude to Professor Christine Jubb that has shared her knowledge to enlighten our understanding of the importance of technology-based skill for us as accountant, auditor, and financial analyst in the Industry 4.0 era. Before we end the session, please allow me to give the certificate. Okay. Okay, please allow me to stop the sharing screen, yeah, Prof. Okay, thank you. Yeah. This is the certificate of appreciation to Professor Christine Jubb, and allow me to read it for you, Prof. This certificate is awarded to Professor Christine Jubb as speaker in international webinar 2021 on the topic of accountants and the future world of work on 2 October 2021. We give this certificate on 2 October 2021 on behalf of Accounting and Finance Department, Binus University. This certificate is signed by Ang Swat Lindawati, SE, MCom, Honors, PhD, CSRS, CSRA, CMA, as a head of accounting study program. I will send this certificate file by email before end of this day, Prof. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give applause by giving virtual applause, or you can also open your camera to show our respect and appreciation to Professor Christine Jubb. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'd like to thank to all lecturers, students, and participants that have lively participated in and engaged in the Q&A session. We have shared a feedback link in the chat room. Hope you could provide us with your precious feedback about the webinar and also your idea for future webinar topic for us to have. Sorry. Now I hand over the session to Jonathan. Joe.
Oh yeah. Thank you, Professor Christine and Miss Linda. We are so thankful today because we gained a lot of new insights, and hopefully it will be applicable to our career ahead. But before we reach the end of the session, we will take a picture together. Koino, can you help us to take the picture, please?
Let's open the camera.
Hi, Miss Linda and Prof. Christine. My name is Arjun Tanel. Allow me to take some photos as the documentation. To all the participants, please open your camera so we can take the photo together. Thank you. We have 5 slides. So we're going to start from the first one. In 3, 2, 1, smile. Okay, for the first one, please wait. And for the second slide, 3, 2, 1, say cheese. Third slide, 3, 2, 1. Okay. Fourth slide, 3, 2, 1. And we got the last slide. In 3, 2, 1. Okay, I think that's all for the documentation. I'll give it back to Jonathan.
Thank you, Archie. And by taking a picture together, it means that the seminar is finished. We want to thank every participant for coming to this seminar. I hope we can see each other on another time. We also want to apologize if there's any mistake during this seminar session. Last, I want to remind that all participants are required to fill their evaluation form that is available in the chat box. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you. Professor, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Linda. Thank you for asking me.
You're
Bye.
welcome. Bye.
Bye.
Stay healthy.
Yeah.
Stay healthy, Prof. Thank you so much.
Prof, later on, could you please send the presentation slide to me? Because I have to attach the presentation slide in our documentation.
I did send them.